So I'm really excited to talk about single-page applications. We're going to have Backbone, WebSockets, local storage. It's going to be great. Okay, that joke worked better in my test audience. We're not talking about single-page applications at all. We're going to talk about seamless iFrames. Okay, well, I guess the opposite is you're all just terrified right then, and I didn't think about that happening. So it's seamless iFrames, the future today. We'll get to, if you don't know what seamless iFrames are, we'll figure that out in just a moment. First of all, just a little bit about me. My name's Ben Vinegar. The last name is real, even though I think I got an argument last night at one of the parties with someone who was convinced that it wasn't. I work at a company called Disqus. I'll talk about Disqus in a moment. And I'm also the co-author of a book called Third-Party JavaScript. If you're walking around upstairs, you may have seen it at the Manning Books thing there floating around. I was actually skulking around near the books area, waiting to see if anyone would read it so that I could pop in and just be like, hey. But I don't think I saw anybody. So a little bit about Disqus. It's a distributed commenting platform. Hopefully you've seen it somewhere. It's served as a third-party JavaScript application. It's on a lot of big websites: CNN, Time, Time.com, People.com, IGN, MLB, a huge list. If you're curious, you can go to our website and then list a whole bunch of them. We don't get quadrillion page views per day, but we do get quite a lot, somewhere in the order of 6 or 7 billion per month, just because we're served on so many of these big, top sites. If you're not familiar with Disqus, it kind of looks like this. This is a screenshot I took from DroidLife, droid-life.com. It's kind of like an Android community website, and these are the comments at the bottom, and I think this was a review of some sort from a couple months ago. You can reply to comments, you can vote stuff up, you can browse the community, share comments, all that kind of stuff. So one thing that's really cool is earlier this year, actually in around June, we just released a new version of Disqus. And I'm really excited about this because we rewrote the client side from the ground up. That's funny. It uses Backbone. So it is a Backbone app. And we use Ender. It's kind of like a micro library packaging framework. I like to joke that we're the only people that actually use Ender today. I don't know if that's true or not. We also use Less. It consumes our public APIs, so pretty much what you see or what's happening on the commenting embed is something that you could hypothetically build at home. That's not like 100% true. There's a couple endpoints that we use for performance and scale that are private. And we do some real-time stuff because real-time's pretty hot these days. But something that's really exciting to me, despite all that stuff, is that the new version is actually completely in an iFrame. So if I go back to that screenshot, I've actually painted a red line around what is an iFrame in this page. And if I didn't paint this line, you'd probably be hard-pressed to know this, because if you think about it, there's a couple cool things going on. You'll notice that there's some pink highlight coming from the website that's being applied to the iFrame. It's kind of hard to tell, but like the links are pink, and there's a highlight color that's pink. The comments section actually like expands and grows as the as you add a comment or real-time comments come in. So it's sort of a little deceptive like that. Now, I know what you're thinking, which is, first of all, not another 3D slide deck. And the second thing is iFrames? Really? I think that whenever I talk about iFrames, for some reason, I feel like half the people in the audience, I don't know, they're not big on iFrames. They're kind of like this dirty, ugly, gross thing that nobody wants to talk about. I almost want to, I don't know if anyone's seen the movie We Have to Talk About Kevin. I don't know. I haven't even seen it, but I can picture the poster, and I'm going to Photoshop it, so we have to talk about iFrames. And I think it's because it harkens back to this time. It's a frame, and it harkens back to this time that we all want to forget, where we used frames to subdivide content, and everything was just gross with lovely borders. That URL works if you want to check it out. But personally, I think iFrames are great. They're great, especially if you're a JavaScript programmer and you're doing third-party stuff. Biggest thing is that they're sandboxes. Code that you're running inside of an iFrame, it can't really touch what's on the outside of that frame. And maybe that sounds bad, but what's maybe even better is that code that's outside the iFrame can't reach inside the iFrame and do bad stuff with it. So that's really important. that means that we can avoid JavaScript conflicts. Blech. Like if you have a parent page that sort of decided to manipulate prototypes in funky ways that aren't fun for your code, you avoid that completely. So in this example, if somebody decided for whatever reason to replace array.prototype.push with a string of this guy flipping a table, that's not going to bother me at all. It's more secure. I just talked about, the code can't communicate iFrame in the parent page. It means it can't go in, steal your cookies, stuff like that. It's also better privacy for users. Since the parent page can't reach into the iFrame and it can't manipulate the DOM, it can't figure out oh, who's logged in, what's your name. Maybe it could assemble all this information and do bad stuff with it. So those are some reasons why I think iFrames are pretty cool and why we're using them in this new version. But the flip side is that for what we're doing, iFrames are also, that's cool, but iFrames are a little tough. Some things that are tough are they don't inherit CSS. So if I wanted to, write, if I'm a web publisher and I want to target some DOM element inside of the iFrame and give it a font, I can't do that. Possibly for good reasons like this. Maybe you wouldn't want this, but you can't do it, even in like a structured way. Hyperlinks, A tags that are inside of your iFrame, they're actually going to navigate the iFrame and not the parent page by default, which can be annoying. If you're not thinking about it, you'll click a link and it will just load a different page inside of the iFrame. And perhaps the trickiest thing, and I think the thing that I get asked questions a lot about, is it just doesn't resize to fit the contents. You've got an iFrame, it's got 1,000 pixels. Unfortunately, you can't just say iFrame height 100%. It doesn't work that way. You have to give it a fixed height. And if there's more content, you're going to get a scroll bar. Flip side of that is you can give an iFrame width 100%. So just to kind of explain all this, I've embedded an iFrame in this page. Because it's an HTML slide, I can do this. Now, this is actually just like a synopsis of Armageddon. You can't tell at all. You wouldn't want to read it. But anyways, as you can see here, my basic font color on my slide deck is white, but I put this iFrame in here, and the iFrame doesn't know where it's being embedded, so it has black text. It's a completely different font. It has this scroll bar because it doesn't expand the width or expand the height to fit the content. I can add more content, and it's gross. And then I got this link here that goes back to my slides. And like I mentioned, if you link to something inside of an iFrame, this is what happens. Right? All I did was actually load my slide deck inside of the iFrame again. And if we're Inception fans, we can kind of do this and scroll down and get this one more time. And this one is hard to, yeah, there it goes. Now we'll do it one more time. No. I think that the W3C, I think we all agree that iFrames are actually really useful, and we want to keep them around. And that's why, frame set and all those frames and that ugly screenshot I show you, those are all deprecated, but iFrame is still here. And we're still, building features on top of iFrames to make them more useful. With HTML5, we got a whole bunch of cool features. That's what this conference is about. But despite the features that have already come, HTML is a living standard, and we're adding more and more stuff to the specification. Some of which really helps iFrames, and that's what we're going to talk about today. One of these is the seamless attribute. So this is an attribute. Oh man, can you read that okay, or is it just no good? There we go. So the seamless attribute goes in the iFrame like this, and what that does is it gives it these kind of seamless properties. It kind of fixes the things that we just talked about were kind of difficult when you're working with iFrames. So what does it do? CSS rules cascade through the iFrame. That example I gave where you could target an element inside of the iFrame and give it whatever style you want, that works with the seamless attribute. Hyperlinks navigate the parent context. That's fixed. And of course, biggest thing of all, the iFrame actually fits the content, which is really awesome. So I'm going to link to an example here. And I wonder if anyone can tell me what just happened. No? No pop quiz? Okay, well, if anyone pieced it together, this slide was actually seamless iFrame. So this is actually a completely different document that's embedded inside, and you couldn't even tell. And I didn't do anything really crazy for it. I just used the seamless attribute. Let's inspect this bad boy. So it's really hard to tell here, but this is the iFrame element right here. Cool? It's pretty cool. And because that example doesn't really show like the height stuff all that great, I'm just gonna bring up another example really quick. Oh my god. So I've got this other example right here, and this is Armageddon Returns. This is the same text I had from earlier, but now seamless. Already you can kind of tell it's got this brutal magenta color. It actually has the same font, which is Helvetica New. And if I do this, the content or the iFrame is actually resizing to fit it. So kind of cool, like a little bit. I don't know. For some reason, I think everyone should be clapping at this. I don't know. Orson Welles is clapping. There's the sort of the cold hard truth to what I've just showed you, and this is true of many HTML things, is that there is not a single stable browser that actually implements what you just saw. And and now you're probably wondering, but what did you just show us? Well, I'm actually running Chrome Canary right now. So it is implemented in Chrome Canary if you want to play around with it. Go ahead, check that out, play around with Seamless. Little quirks I've found, it only works over HTTP, so I'm actually serving these slides over Apache because it wouldn't work over file. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't see that in the spec, but maybe it is. Now, this is interesting. Other browsers have supported Seamless because the spec has been there for a while. But the way they supported it is they actually just sort of did this superficial CSS on top of it. They made the iFrame transparent and just took away the border and the padding, and it kind of looked a little more seamless. But actually, and I've crossed this out because it seems like in latest versions they've actually undone that because that really wasn't helping anybody. So that means it's coming soon, right? I mean, if Chrome Canary has it implemented and Chrome is a super modern browser, it's only a matter of time, you know, until we all have this really cool feature. Well, it's also been in Chrome Canary for a really long time, since May. And so I really thought it was like, oh, it's in Chrome 18. That means when, you know, the release channel of Chrome comes out, I'm going to have this. Nope. It just kind of keeps getting bumped back, and it hasn't been landed yet. If you look at the ticket for this, there's a ticket on implementing this feature. The last comment is from last month, which is like, hey, is anybody going to land this? So I'm not even sure who's championing this at all. There's a ticket in Firefox that is completely unassigned, and I don't think anyone's even really looking at it. Internet Explorer 10, I mean, I didn't try it, but I'm just going to take a guess. I'm just taking a guess. It's not even listed on caniuse.com. That's how bad it is. It would just be red. It would just be red everywhere. But it's a totally legit feature, and yeah. Well, so you're probably thinking this is kind of a funny talk because I've just sort of trolled you all with this really cool feature, and then I've told you, oh, by the way, you can't use it at all. So good day. I'm just going to walk off. But before you file the exit. For the second half of this talk, we're going to actually do some code examples and figure out how we can kind of simulate / emulate Seamless in old browsers, everything that we use today. Just a caveat, it's not going to be 100% as good as Seamless, but it's pretty good. This is the kind of stuff that we use at Disqus, and I think it's probably valuable for anyone who's working with iFrames. So the plan, the setup, is this is going to require JavaScript executing in two environments. We're going to have JavaScript on the parent page, and we're going to have JavaScript running inside of the iFrame. And between the two of them, we're going to solve all these problems. They're going to talk to each other. And normally, I mean, I mentioned earlier that iFrames if they're hosting an external document, you can't actually access each other, except in one way, and that's through an HTML5 feature called window.postMessage. Postmessage is this way of basically sending messages in this safe, controlled way between windows, windows including iFrames. And I'd say that probably like 90% of the use case is through iFrames. We're going to bump this up a little bit. Oop. Can you guys see that okay? A little bit. We can give it the pink highlight. I added something so that I could like edit all these in real time in case I found a bug, which is kind of neat, except now I can't select them. I didn't think of that. If you can read the top, what's happening is I get a reference. This is operating in the parent page, so I'm in that context. I'm going to get a reference to the iFrame element, and I'm going to post it a message. And that message is just sup. It's just a string. The first parameter is the message body. The second parameter is a target origin. That's usually for security purposes. If you want to read up about it, you can check it out. For now, we're just going to use a wildcard asterisk, which just says, this window doesn't matter. It's going to get this message. Now, we're inside of the iFrame now. I got to listen for these messages. The way that you listen for messages is you add an event listener to window, and you listen for the message event. When any message gets sent to the window, this handler is going to fire. You can look at the message and react to it. In this case, I'm just going to alert the message, the string message that I got from the other window, and that's it. So this is just like the quickest post-message primer. So just remember that a little bit. We're going to come back to it. So one by one, we're just going to solve like those three problems. We're going to start with the easiest, relative links, or having links inside of your iFrame navigate, the parent window and not the iFrame. So if you recall, it was kind of like this, and we did the whole, inception thing. We're going to solve that. Now, if you think about it, that's actually pretty easy. You just have to use target in all of your links. So if you've got an A tag and you're linking somewhere, you just got to do target equals parent, and that's going to actually load whatever that URL is in the parent document. That was easy. But I mean, if you're going to use this, you got to repeat it for every link, which is, I don't know, it could be kind of error prone. If you ever forget it, if you make a mistake, you're going to load a page inside of an iFrame. Maybe you're doing widget stuff, and you're going to load a document inside of a tiny little like button or something, and that'd be not fun. So a technique that we use, which I think is pretty cool, involves this element called base. Base is kind of like this old school element from HTML4 that I don't think I ever really used before. And what it does is it specifies a base URL for all relative URLs. So if you look at this top example, I create a base tag, and I give it an href to some URL. And now if I have a relative link anywhere on that same document, it's actually going to point to, like, the base is going to be what I put in that base tag. Does that kind of make sense? So here, I just had an href that went to /, but because of the base tag, that actually translates it to example.com/foo. Now, on its own, this doesn't fix anything, but base also supports a target attribute. So not only can I give it an href, I can also give it a target attribute. So by default, I can make everything target the parent. So now the exception can be something else. If I wanted to load something in iFrame, I would have to say target equals self or something. So here's a quick example of like what that looks like. This is like a full document. I've got my base tag in the head, and I'm going to specify, parent.com as like the base href, because I want all the links to be relative to the parent page. And I'm also going to say that the default target is going to be parent as well. And now I got these links below. There I've got this like relative link. Even with the document fragment, that works too. So the document fragment becomes parent.com/boom. I don't know what boom is. And then below I have like an absolute link that's going to disqus.com. That's not going to be influenced by the base href, but it will still open in the parent. So that referring URL is useful too, because if you want to have relative URLs inside of your iFrame, you want them to point relative to the parent page. This is all about you trying to seamlessly exist inside of the parent page. How do you obtain it? You can use document.refer. That's just a property, kind of like a global property that's hanging out that is like what document referred this one. And if you're loading an iFrame on somebody's website, it's going to be the parent page. The thing is that value isn't available 100% of the time, probably like 99% of the time. But there's some situations in which you can't get the refer property. If you're going between HTTPS and HTTP, the browser could just disable refer tags for privacy or for whatever reason. Some do not track plugin, and then this won't work. So this is now when we come back to post message. Since we have JavaScript that's going to run on the parent page, and we've got JavaScript that's going to run inside the iFrame, we can just get the JavaScript on the parent page to pull for what the URL is and send that into the iFrame and generate the base tag for us. So at the top here, this is running in the parent. I'm going to get the iFrame element again. I'm going to get the iFrame element again, just repeat myself, and then I'm going to send a message. And this time, you can also send, well, I'm getting a little confusing here, but here I'm sending a little bit more kind of like structured data. I'm sending actually an array. The first parameter is like the type of message I'm going to send, and then the second argument in that array is going to be the href. That's so that on the other side, I can kind of look at this message body and figure out, oh, what kind of data am I dealing with? It's sort of like this really stupid protocol I've designed. Please don't use this. And now, inside the iFrame, I'm going to listen for that message event. When I get it, I'm going to pull out, the event name and then the data. And then if I get this refer event name, well, then I'm going to inject a base element with that refer that I just extracted from the parent page. Does that make sense? Nods? Some nods. Cool. And now just like injecting the base element is pretty simple. We're just going to create a new element base. I'm going to assign the href that we got from the parent page. Just going to set the target to parent, and then we're just going to throw it into the head. And that's it. And that solved that sort of like, the link problem of iFrames. So we're going to move on to the next part, which is inheriting styles. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can kind of go about this. One of them is you have JavaScript on the parent page. You could look at all their style sheet objects, and you could just try and figure out which of those rules would target your iFrame elements, and then try to make that happen. I guess it's possible. I'm just way too lazy, so I haven't even bothered. Somebody, a stronger person than me, could try. You could just inject some predefined CSS into the iFrame. So imagine you have some, website provider, and they provide something akin to like a JavaScript template, but it's CSS, and it's inside of a script element with a strange type, and you just extract it and inject the CSS into the iFrame. I don't think that sentence made any sense whatsoever. I think I'm going next level on this. But anyways, just imagine like the publisher provides some CSS, and you just grab it and inject it into the iFrame. And I mean, that totally works. You probably have all the tools you would need to do that right now. But it's not really seamless. It's not like I can just throw this anywhere and it's going to look right. It would depend on the publisher to kind of provide this stuff for us. So kind of the way we've been doing it is the poor man's choice, in which we just sort of select a couple things that we think are really important, and we apply those into the iFrame. Some of those are like color, font color, pretty important. Link color could be pretty important. You don't want blue and purple default link colors when the parent page has specified these really nice, hilarious colors like badass or something like that. I don't know. You could select those and inject those. So the way we're going to do that is it's kind of like a best guess. You know where the iFrame element is in the page, you can inject some test elements next to the iframe, figure out what styles are impacting those elements, pull them out, inject them into the iframe. So there's an example of, this is like a hypothetical situation. I inject an A tag, a span tag right next to the iframe, figure out what their properties are. So here's a quick example of this. Is the pink helping, by the way, or am I just making it worse? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to try and zoom into a little bit. So here's a function called getIFrameStyles. And given a reference to the iframe, I'm just going to generate a span and put it right next to the iframe. And then one by one, I'm going to use, this is using jQuery, but jQuery has like a computed CSS helper that will just help me figure out what's applied to this. This is like a really naive implementation. There's a bunch of edge cases. I'll give you source code later if you're interested in that, or come talk to me. But hopefully you get the idea. Just injecting test elements, figuring out what's kind of going on with them, and then this is going to generate a big hash of a whole bunch of CSS properties. Next, this is going to look like very much like the base tag kind of example. We got to get that data and we got to inject it to the iframe. So just like before, I'm going to use post message, send this message. Now, hopefully, my little protocol makes a little sense. Now I'm going to send styles. Here's the data. And over here, now I'm listening for multiple messages. I'm listening for the refer message. I'm also listening to the styles message. Because it's important to understand that every message that goes to this window is going to go through this handler. So I got to respond to every single type. So if I get the styles message, we're just going to inject some styles using a helper function that looks really kind of simple in jQuery. jQuery, you can just take a hash of style attributes and just put them on body, and that can give you kind of some base styles for your iframe. If you want to go further, you can use those base styles and you can create custom classes that you can apply. So that's something we've done. Like we have a class called like publisher highlight color, and we take that from the link color. So if you think back to that example I showed way back in the beginning where I was showing Droid Life and there was some pink that we pulled out, that's the publisher highlight color, and we kind of apply that selectively wherever we want. And it works pretty good. So last thing on the list is dynamic content. And this is the resizing problem. It's mostly about height, because I mentioned you can give iframes width 100% and that'll work. So resizing, fundamentally not too difficult. Inside of the iframe, you got to figure out how big the content is. You use post message to send the value to the parent. So now we're going the other way, right? The iframe has the content. The parent page is where you're going to actually set the height attribute on the iframe element. Now, the thing is that that's okay if you're just doing it once, but if your content changes, you have to do that over and over and over again, right? Somebody adds a new comment to discuss, we got to resize. Another comment, resize. Yeah, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm trying to make it more flowery. So here's a quick example of this. So let's say that inside of the iframe, I got this function. It's called resize. All it does, I'm using jQuery here again. I just get the height of the page. That may not be super correct, but it's fundamentally correct. And this time we're going the other way. So from the iframe, we're going to send a parent. We're going to send a. Oh crap! This is why I had this going. So we're going to send a message to the parent window. Same kind of protocol idea: set height and a height value. And now inside the parent, we're going to set our own event listener. And when we get a message that matches set height, we're just going to put that height explicitly on the iframe element. Now, So that's pretty easy if you're doing it manually. Like if you know when you're going to resize stuff, okay, I'm sure you guys can all figure that out. But wouldn't it be really cool if you could automatically get stuff to resize, just like the seamless attribute? There's a couple ways you can do it. One is using mutation events, which I think is something that Mozilla introduced a couple years ago. Problem is that it's deprecated now and it's slow. There are mutation observers, which are like heir apparent to mutation events. These are just sort of like, they're events that fire and tell you when the DOM has changed, and so you could listen to them and be like, oh, dude, resize. Problem here is it's DOM level 4, and I think it's in Chrome. It's in WebKit browsers, and Firefox, no IE, no Opera. I don't know about IE10. I'll have to look into that. Another possibility is you could just create a timer using set timeout and just listen every 100 milliseconds, every half second, and just figure out the size and then resize if it changed. So we don't do any of that. We actually just manually trigger everything as it happens. So we have this kind of like callback function that we call update DOM. And in update DOM, you're going to manipulate the DOM. In the first one, I'm going to append this div. In the second one, I'm going to add a class that makes something bigger. And what update DOM does, excuse me, is it's just going to execute that callback and just do the rendering. But then it's also going to trigger resize. This is just kind of like the style that we use. I think that like using this callback syntax actually sticks out a lot more, because you could do it this way if you really wanted to. Right? Like I could just manually do this, and then just trigger resize all the time whenever I did this. But I don't think it sticks out as much. And we do code reviews and stuff. We want to make sure that it's very obvious when somebody is doing a manipulation that actually resizes the page. So that's why we kind of go for this style. So whenever you modify the DOM, resize the frame. Kind of sucks. It's not just adding and removing elements. If you change the style in any way that changes the height, you add a class or whatever, you got to know that you got to trigger a resize. It's error prone. Sometimes we miss one. The upside is that it's fast. If you're using like the set timeout and you're polling, unless you're polling every 10 milliseconds, there's going to be some lag between when your content expands and then it knows to resize the iFrame to fit it. And I don't know, running code on a loop just kind of makes me feel bad. So there's kind of a side problem to this as well. I'm just going to address it really quickly. And that's just resizing. Resizing the iFrame is kind of fundamentally slow. And I'll just try to explain why. Every time you query the content dimensions, you force a browser reflow. What that means is that the browser, you append some elements, you add some classes. The browser doesn't just do those right away. You write a lot of JavaScript code and you're like, why don't I see this rendering right away? It isn't until the browser releases and then you see all your changes happen at once, right? It's just trying to be fast. It's trying to queue up all these operations that it wants to do, and it's going to do them in one chunk. And it does it by default. But the moment that you try to query like dimensions of something, the browser can't do that anymore. It has to like flush that big queue of operations, figure out where the content is at that point, and then continue. So if you're constantly resizing the iFrame, you're just sort of fundamentally like flushing, causing reflows. And reflows are just really bad. They're just like one of the biggest performance bottlenecks in kind of like web-based software. Here's a quote. One of the most expensive functions of a browser. Nicholas Zizakis, he wrote high-performance JavaScript. I thought that would make this more compelling. I don't know. So the way we solve this is we use a technique called debounce. So this up here is actually, it's just the same. Right, I have my callback, and it's just I'm going to update the DOM. I'm just signaling to my code, I'm going to update the DOM and do this code. And then over here, I use this debounce function, and this is provided by underscore, but there's implementations all over the place, you know, jQuery plugin or whatever. Whenever I actually want to do a resize, I don't just do it. I kind of wait until I have my own queue of stuff. I wait until basically we want to stop resizing, then it's going to actually trigger the resize. And you avoid the situation in which you're constantly reflowing the browser just to resize the iFrame. I should probably talk a little bit more about debounce. I didn't want to get into it too much, but I recommend looking into it. So basically, if you use that technique, you kind of guarantee that you're only going to get one reflow every time you're going to do like a whole bunch of, imagine you had like 30 update DOM calls in a row. You're going to make sure that you're only going to resize the iFrame once, you're only going to query the DOM once, and you're only going to cause one reflow. I put 50 milliseconds on that debounce time. That's how much time passes before you decide to flush all your calls. I've played around with, you know, the minimum amount, 0, which I think is like 12 milliseconds. It's all good. All right, so taking all that stuff that I just kind of showed you code-wise, I got a demo. Let's take a look at how good it works. So this is what I showed you earlier. We got Armageddon here. It's purple. And, whoa. Oh, damn it. I was going to show you what seamless looked like in Firefox. It's just god-awful. You can take my word for it. Oh, well, here we go. Here's seamless here. This is in Canary. Looks good. Here's Firefox. Exactly the same code. That's how awesome I think seamless is. So you saw this. I kind of resized it, and it knows what to do. Over here, I've got my simulated version. This is using kind of all the stuff I showed you. The code is not 100% the same, but it's fundamentally the same. And kind of does the same thing. What's that? Did I? Temporarily? Yeah. Well, that's because I had that probably delay or whatever. I could tweak the delay. Hey, man, I'm not as good as browser. I can add more content. Works pretty good. You didn't notice it that time, did you? Haha. I click this link. It works. And it's you know, obviously I've kind of like tweaked the colors and font in such a way that this is like, it looks really impressive. But I think if you kind of get those fundamental colors and those fundamental fonts, it can look pretty good, right? I think if I expand this other one, I think you can't actually tell the difference between them. Yeah, kind of cool. So there is actually a library out there. This is new. I actually only just learned about it on the weekend. NPR put out something called responsive iFrame. Kind of does what I showed you, the same kind of hackery kind of stuff. It's like a jQuery library, but it actually just focuses on the resizing problem. It doesn't do anything I showed you with like the links or the CSS. But it's probably a good place to get started because the resizing stuff is arguably the hardest part. And that's kind of all I have for you guys.